Good morning and welcome to the show. This is the Daily Brief with me, Samuel Njoroge. And indeed, being a Monday, the 19th day of August 2019, the nation has woken up to sad news of the fallen Kikuyu musician, that is John DeMathew, who passed on courtesy of an accident at Blue Post late last night as he was making way home from a performance he had. Of course, he's a musician who's known to have made hits that have characterized the Kikuyu culture for quite a long time. At one point, he was ill, but he was able to get well. And as much as he had all the energy to continue with music, this morning, the curtains fell on this particular gentleman. He's currently laid at the Kenyatta University mortuary, and we shall be interacting with Franklin Masharia in the course of the Daily Brief for a link and an update from that end. Our condolences to the friends, family, and the entire nation on the loss of John DeMathew. Indeed, it's quite a hit, I beg your pardon, especially on the music of fraternity, most especially from Kikuyu region. For now, we also need to appreciate other stories that are currently developing. We've got the Chief Justice, David Maraga, currently presiding over a judges' conference. So if we may but cross over to this particular event and listen in to the address that is being delivered by Chief Justice David Maraga.
I wish you all a wonderful time in Mombasa at this 2019 annual colloquium, and most if not all open and fruitful deliberations during this colloquium. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
Thank you, my Lord. When I spoke earlier, I said it could have been worse. We left this place last year on the 25th of August, and on the 17th of September, we lost one of us, the Honorable Mr. Justice Mukunya of the ELC Kirogoya. It is for that reason that I ask all of us to be upstanding. And observe a minute's silence. Thank God for the life of Judge Mukunya, the work he did for this country. Pray that God continues to give his family strength to deal with his absence, and to pray that God is taking care of Judge Mukunya's life and soul in a good place, and that he will make all of us ready, because the Bible says, I imagine the Quran may have something similar, that last day is not.
And the judges there take a moment of silence to honor the life of the fallen Judge Mukunya, and that is being done by the judges, of course, overseen by Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu. And we revisit our top story of the hour, where Kikuyu Benga musician, that is John DeMathew, is dead. And we are now joined by our reporter Franklin Masharia, who's joining us live from the Kenyatta University mortuary with an update on this particular story. Thank you so much for joining us, Franklin. Kindly bring us up to speed with what's happening from your end. Okay, and I'm reliably informed that we shall be getting back to Franklin in just a short while. You can interact with us. Use the hashtag The Daily Brief at K24 TV and at Sam W. Njoroge to interact with us in the course of the show. Our SMS line is 21222, and our sign language interpreter for this hour will be Muthoni Wagaki. Let me introduce my guests to you right about now. Dan Njoroge, seated to my extreme left. Welcome to the program.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you on the show. And to my immediate left, I've got Mike Agwanda. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, I defied protocol, Dennis. And now we have Dennis Thumbe, who is seated right there in the middle. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
So much.
And maybe I'll start with you, Dennis.
Yes.
Have you ever interacted with John DeMathew, even listening to his music?
I have definitely interacted with his music. I think way from childhood and thereabout. And of course, his music has defined culture and the evils in society. I think that is what John DeMathew was technically focusing. He'll pick up on an ill, a social ill, whether it's alcoholism, whatever it is that is affecting his community. And then he'll sing about it, he'll confront it in his music. And so suddenly his loss is a loss to a preacher who did whatever he did through music. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly a grave loss to the community thereabout. So my sincere condolences to the entire community and the entire nation. Right. And certainly being an art lover, it's a tragic loss. I may not listen to his music anymore, but certainly that's a tragic loss to the community.
Right.
Absolutely, yes.
That's true. Our condolences to the friends and family of the late John DeMathew. I'm now informed that we can bring in Franklin Masharia for an update from Kenyatta University Mortuary. Good morning, Franklin. Kindly bring us up to speed with what you've prepared for us from that end.
A good morning to you, but not a good morning for the lovers of Benga music, especially those who listen to Kikuyu music after the death of John DeMathew, one of the legendary musicians from the Kikuyu land. He died yesterday, last evening, on Thika Road near Blue Post Hotel in a tragic road accident. We've seen friends and family members streaming here to just see the remains of the legendary musician who belted about 350 songs in his career spanning over 35 years. He's a man who was known in many parts of the country, and he has been doing tours for the last 2 months, of course calling them the John DeMathew Tour, touring several areas. And the last tour he held was in Embu about a month ago, and of course he was saying that this was part of his giving back to the society and inspiring the upcoming musicians. But now he is no more. He's a man who has sung about many issues, some political, other social issues, and of course urging Kenyans and especially people from Kikuyu land not to abandon their culture, and also talking about politics, talking about succession. He's a man who has even found himself on the wrong side of the law, especially with the NCIC over what at one point was termed as incitement. But what is clear is that he was a person who was loved by many, and since he started singing in the late 1980s, his songs have of course been touching the lives of people, and they have been very happy about him, and most of them very popular, and that is why Kenyans mourn the death of this legendary musician. His remains were brought here last evening, and we understand that people continue to mourn in Maraga County, where he hails from, Gatanga constituency to be particular. And of course, Gatanga constituency is the bedrock of Kikuyu music. You can only compare it to a place called Kigoma in Tanzania, where you find that the most famous musicians from Tanzania come from that place. The most famous musicians in Kikuyu land come from Gatanga, and of course now it is a big loss to the country and the Kikuyu community to be particular. For now, people continue to stream in just to see the remains, and from here we'll of course get details of the funeral arrangements. We've seen people mourning, or leaders mourning the death of DeMathew, including Murang'a Governor Mwangi Wairia. He has already sent his condolences to the family of the late John DeMathew. He was the fourth born in a family of 8, and he was a husband to 2 wives. Now we can call them widows, and he was the father to 3 children. Njoroge.
Thank you so much, Franklin Masharia, for that update live from Kenyatta University. And just to get some of the tweets that have been shared online, especially on the death of John DeMathew. One here, Oliver, says if there was something that John DeMathew was good at, it was addressing social, economic, and political challenges facing the locals in his music. Mwaboza says, Paula DeMathew, when you were alive, they gave HSC honors to some other people who did nothing to change Kenya and did not deserve such an honor. Today you're gone. Kila mtu anasema you were a legend. Pole sana kaka. And Kim, you say John DeMathew was there in the cassettes era, the CD era, the DVD era, the Skiza Tune era, and still is even in this YouTube craze era. You know why? He produced evergreen music with a touch of modernity. He will forever remain in our hearts. May he rest in peace. Those are some of the tweets that we're in a position to share with you as of now, as far as this is concerned. But right about now, let's shed light into stories that are currently developing across the country. We've got our reporters on the ground to ensure that you're properly briefed on what will be happening in the nation and beyond this day. And gentlemen, we've seen judges in a conference today. And when you just look at the judiciary, it is an institution that has come under sharp scrutiny, especially when it comes to the war against corruption. What do you make of the priorities that should guide the agenda of the judiciary moving forward at such a time as now, Dan?
Well, I think rightfully the way you've intimated is the fact that, we are staring at a situation where not only judiciary has come under sharp criticism, but also the complaint that judiciary have been stifled of resources to carry out their agenda through. I think that within these gathering, there are key important issues that I would recommend to the discussion of judiciary. One is trying to clean up the system and restore the faith, that Kenyans had with it. Remember, it's coming on a backdrop when Justice Ojwang had just been acquitted from the previous accusation, and a number of judges were still on a sharp criticism. So these would actually inform the meeting for them to have a sitting and discuss how then would we come out as saviors and pivots of justice, as opposed to the public perception that judiciary has been mad with corruption. And you see judges at the center, of cases and bribes. So I think that would be a consideration to this conference. And
a good place to start.
And a good place to start, definitely.
Mike, do judges have the moral authority to respond to public interest, or their role should be predominantly interpret the law and be guided by it?
I think that is where, as a country, we've gone wrong. We've confined judges to the courtrooms. We've confined judges to privacy of the highest order. You hardly meet judges in public places. They hardly mingle with people. And that, to me, is a disaster in itself. Our judges are human beings. They are our brothers and sisters, and we need to see them, mingle with people. We need to see them be able to educate people, be able to speak in conferences, be able to go to schools and tell schools, students and university students and even secondary school, up to primary schools, and let them have some CSR part of their life so that they can start instilling the reasons why judges are there, the reasons why lawyers are there, and why it will be very difficult for you to have things your own way when you go to a court of law. Instead, go into arbitration, have the community elders resolve some of these matters. When we are having judges meeting, and one of the things that now the country is discussing is, look, you've just promoted 10 high court judges to the Court of Appeal.
Yeah.
And what that means is you've left 10 courts without judges. the backlog that this country has been complaining about is not just a thing that is going to go away, but it's going to worsen, because what you did is you promoted these judges, but you did not hire the judges that will take their place immediately. And so the cases that were being handled by these very judges are not going to be heard for a very, very long time. They might be transferred to another judge, but again, you're realizing that that very judge was having her own cases. And so we are in that moment, and as my colleague here has said, some of the main issues that this country is grappling with is the injustices meted by the corrupt judges in this country.
At one point, there was a lot of hope, especially when Mwai Kibaki came into power, that the vetting of judges and magistrates, led by Sharad Rao, would cast some ray of hope into the conduct of judges within the country. But years later, we still hear Dan, we still hear Mike talk about few corrupt elements within this institution, but most especially the controversy around the Judicial Service Commission. Has it contributed in any way to the state of the judiciary as we see it now?
So for me, that's a very integral question. And, you know, instrumental reforms in the country are really the cornerstone to constitutionalization and the constitutional process. And I think one of the things that we need to do is do a reform audit and ask ourselves, up until the promulgation of the Constitution, how far has the judiciary reformed? And of course, the central role of that, we have one of the most bloated budgets in Africa. Has that contributed to the reforms? Number two, what has been the role of Parliament in institutionalizing reforms? Because Parliament is a legislation bit, and I think we have part of 3 bills that Parliament was to review or has reviewed, and need to look at it, and one of it is what you've mentioned. Of course, that's the vetting of judges and magistrates bill, which is of 2011, Judicial Service Commission bill of 2011, the Supreme Court bill of 2011, the Environment and Land Court bill of 2011. So there's that bit, but also there's a work of the judiciary in terms of decentralizing structures.
Let's talk about decentralizing structures in just a short while, even as we listen in to what Chief Justice David Maraga had to say about the state of the judiciary.
The judges of the Court of Appeal, the judges of the High Court, the judges of the Environment and Land Court, the judges of the Employment and Labor Relations Court, the director of our Training Institute, the CRJ. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. I'm happy and I thank God that we are all assembled here today for this year's colloquium. The annual Judges Colloquium has gradually become an integral part of our work as judges of the Superior Courts of Kenya. It is an event during which we spend time away from our chambers and courts to reflect on the past year as well as plan for the year ahead. Through the colloquium, we also get an opportunity to spend a couple of days together to bond as professional colleagues on the bench and to deliberate on issues that most impact on our work, but which we normally have no time for given our busy schedules. I recently attended the wedding of one of our colleagues, and I was impressed by the fellowship that we had and the friendship that exists between us. Please let us maintain that spirit of unity and togetherness. As always, we have a packed program with many important topics to be discussed. The theme of this year's colloquium, Balancing Judiciary, Judicial Independence and accountability is deeply relevant and in harmony with the sessions planned for this year's event. As you all know, judicial independence is, as it were, the bedrock of our existence, without which we will cease to be a judiciary in a constitutional democracy. Kenyans fought for us to get to where we are, and we are duty-bound to exercise and preserve this independence for our time and in the posterity. Independence, however, also comes with a lot of responsibility, for which we must account at all times, at both individual and institutional levels. We must account both in terms of the quality of our work as well as the quantitative value, how strictly we adhere to the rule of law, and how proficiently and efficiently we manage the cases that come before us. In the 4 days ahead, there will be sessions that will enable us to interrogate this theme more deeply and ask ourselves how we have fared in the just ended financial year. Needless to say that judicial accountability and transparency require us to receive feedback as a way of improving our service delivery. To this end, we have arranged, as part of this colloquium, to have an engagement tomorrow morning with some of our key stakeholders to get some form of feedback on the services that we offer. They will not touch on any live issues in court, but will generally talk about the services that we render. This is because some of the decisions we make on matters that are brought before us have an impact beyond the parties who appear before us. Even beyond the colloquium, we must always be open to receiving some feedback on our work. When some concerns are expressed regarding inconsistencies in the granting of bail and bond and in sentencing, for example, it is not always an attempt to question our exercise of discretion. As I have said, we must vigorously defend our decisional independence, but also always recognize that it comes with a lot of responsibility on our part. It must not be brazen, whimsical, or random. We must act at all times in a manner that...
We crossed over to the address of David Maraga at a point where Dennis Thumbi here was making a point on judicial structures and how they've been in a position to influence the progress of the judiciary or the lack of it. So you could probably pick it up from there.
Yeah, so I was talking about the fact that judiciary itself must devolve its structures and then must further democratize. What judiciary has done so far is not come up with a solution that fits our constitution and the reforms that are going there, whether it's in the electoral reforms, police reforms, devolution and devolved functions reforms. It must suit itself to fit the current constitution. And I think it's my brothers who mentioned still that the judiciary is still in the courtrooms, perhaps centralized, and it doesn't fit the constitutionalism of decentralization and further democratization and further decentralization of power, not just the unit. So reforms are a cornerstone to judiciary to make sure that it fits where COK 2010 and Parliament is key. Unfortunately, Parliament is concerned with other things that are not necessarily Kenyan and they're personal. So I think it's a long journey, but I think it starts from look and see. It is the audit process itself and an honest introspection of Maraga and his team and saying, where are we vis-a-vis COK 2010 and its aspirations?
Beyond the Maraga,
yes, sir,
and his team, The scope of work for the judiciary definitely extends beyond judges and lawyers. We're looking at offices, for example, DPP, DCI, and in light of a conversation the nation is currently having of a multi-sectoral approach to the war against graft, could we be having any gaps, any holes that could be hindering the judiciary from achieving its mandate when you look at these offices? Dan.
Well, I'm happy that, you see, you alluded to the fact that, the work of judiciary as the arm of the government, it's so much beyond, the units, and of course, Dennis had alluded to that, which is also important. But then I'm trying to understand, before I come to your question, the branding that, you remember the branding after the declaration, when the declaration that there be a repeat of election. And you realize that after that time, there's a lot that happened within judiciary and the threat and the revisiting, issue. But then what really I've seen is the work that Maraga is trying to do to refrain a lot from digging deep into political issues. We're just trying to maintain the image of judiciary as independent. But then comes another very important task, is that of trying to help in, conviction, trials and making sure that cases that are brought before it are watertight cases. And some, like we've noticed before, that the three-tier, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the DCI, the Director of Public Prosecution, has ever complained that, we do our work, but when we put these cases forward to the judiciary, they're either thrown out of a technicality or because of lack of proper evidence or any other issue reports that the case are not watertight. So, and this comes back to my opening remarks that we might be expecting a lot from judiciary. And I think within its internal structures, even as they discuss to expedite these cases and make sure that they meet the obligation, but then there are external factors that are trying to penetrate through the work of the judiciary. Mm-hmm. And I've just said, for example, the deliberate muscling of the resources that would be taken to judiciary by the National Assembly and even by the executive, becoming a problem for judiciary to expand, even as Dennis said that it is important to devolve structures and minus resources.
At any one point, have we ever held the judiciary as a victim of circumstances? We shall revisit that question as soon as we return from this break, so keep it the Daily Brief.